Okay, I'd like to go ahead and call the Budget Advisory Committee meeting, special meeting with Board of Education to order for Wednesday, May 9th. All members are present now for 7-member TIET who will be here momentarily. And with that, we are on to the pledge, which will be led by David James. Chelsea, you want to go ahead and do
Yeah. Right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we are on to the meeting. First item on our agenda is public comment. It does say for closed session items, but that was a typo. It should be for open session, and I did receive 3 requests. The first is from Joe Turner, who wants to talk about an open forum study.
Thank you for letting me come and speak in front of you again today. About a month ago, I came here. It was over similar issues about laying people off and setting down notices and things like that. And I had just made a suggestion that seemed to get a lot of positive feedback about having an open forum where the district, the union members, or the board, could all come together in an auditorium, open questions for everyone to kind of be on the same page. I received a lot of, everyone here seems like, good idea, let's do that. I have talked to some people, they say, well, maybe we could do that next year. Next year is too late. These issues are in front of us right now. I just want to reiterate, Temple City is just too small of a place. We have all of our schools within less than 2 miles from each other. This should be a much more tight-knit, close community, and I'd like to see us resolve some of these issues, or all of these issues, in a much more respectable way. And I'd like to, once again, if we're not going to have an open forum like that, I'd like to invite you. I talked with my colleagues at Cloverly today, and for the board members, for everyone to come together, you're welcome to come to our school. I invite you, Mr. Ridley, Mr. Smith, Mr. Walker, come to our school. I want you to talk to us, ask us.
Attending our budget advisory sessions as well. I want to spend just a couple minutes really talking about our process so that you know, what we did, how we did it, and then give you the majority of the time to look at the items that are on the list for cuts for next year to Ken at the last BAC meeting asked a good question. He said, well, some of the time, I don't know if we do this, what's the domino effect? If we actually impose this cut, what are some of the things that are affected by it? And so we want you to have the opportunity to talk and have the Budget Advisory Committee give you feedback on some of the reasons why some of these ideas that we came up with are great ideas and others may not be so great, and the domino effect may not be what we really want to live with. So process-wise, we all got together and we looked at the list that was done last year that the Budget Advisory Committee, the ideas that they came up with. We looked at the list of things that had been built into this year's cuts, and we know when that budget was built that some of the things were put in as placeholders because you needed to submit a balanced budget, and so some of the things on the items may not necessarily be things that as you look at them now you would want to consider. So one of the things we knew we had to do is we had to come up with some more ideas. And so at one of our meetings, we simply had 3x5 cards and everybody put every idea they could think of, good, bad, and different compared to everybody's perspective, and we simply made a list of those things. So on the list that you have, and you probably have multiple copies of this, you notice on the left-hand column there is an item number, and we tried to always keep the item number the same as it was on last year's list so we wouldn't lose track of it, so we would be able to see where was it included last year and where is it now, and what list does it move to. After we had those items, we had every one of the groups, and there were 6 groups. There's the 105, 823, the teachers, management, secondary management, elementary management, and district office. So the 6 groups all sat down in groups and they voted from 1 to 4 for each of those items, 1 being this would be an easy cut for our group to make, 4 this is a difficult cut. Now it's really easy at that point to say, well, and you all have a list, the board has a list that says cut votes, because they thought you might be interested in seeing how we came up with the number. And you can see sometimes it's 5 groups thought it was a 1 and 1 group thought it was a 4. And you can say, well, everybody just voted for what they really thought, affected their group. But in fact, when you listen to the discussion of the people in the group, it's very clear. People are concerned with the main thing. There are people losing jobs and there are programs being lost. And how can we come up with ideas or ways that maybe the board doesn't have to cut those people and programs that maybe last year we looked at and, well, it was put on the list because it's a big number. And so there are very few of the items on the list, as you all know, that are just money items, where there's no people attached to them, there's no programs attached to them, they're just money. If there were more of those items, we probably wouldn't have this many people in the group. So after that was done, we then ranked them according to what looked to be the easiest to the lowest. And so you have the list, and it's not really prioritized in the sense of saying, well, we looked at them, we looked at the programs that they provided, but I think as people did their votes, those were the things they considered. So you have the prioritized list, or the list, at least the ranked list, it's not prioritized. And you have the value of those things. You have a couple other lists as well, because we realized some of our ideas were not necessarily things that you could cut. Some of them were things that were negotiable. And I think one of the things, that last year, some of the things that were put on the list were things that the board said, well, let's do this, or let's put this in the budget as a placeholder. But the reality is, you need the people at the table, the negotiating groups, the groups to say, yes, we recognize the need, and a lot of the money that you can find really is in these items, and they recognize that. And so tonight, we're going to talk to you about some of those things, and the reality of how difficult it is, to come up with enough money without their help. Some of the things are tracking items, and those are just things that have been done, money that's being spent, and just wanting to make sure that there's some process either for the BAC or for David and the board to say, well, are we really managing these items in a manner that the money goes as much as possible to general fund as opposed to
some of the things that we like, but not necessarily things that we need. And then some of the items are also, revenue generators, some ideas that we came up with that are not necessarily things that you would cut, but maybe some ideas to help generate ideas. And I think our PE group, the group that was working on the PE program and how to make cuts without cutting the program, have some ideas that fit into that generating revenues. And then the last group is alternative spending. So there's money being spent one way, and would it be more effective to program to change that, to spend that money in a different place? So that's our process, that's what you have. You also have, David made an attachment blank that said, well, as we're discussing and as we are working together, as I'm sitting here working, that I can say, well, if we didn't cut this, that's a minus number, and if we then added these things because they were put in another year, can we still balance the budget, which is obviously everybody's need at the bottom line. So that's our process. What would the BAC want to come out of this, and have you, first of all, to understand how important they feel some of these items are, and how to really look at the items and understand that some of the items that were selected for the budget for this upcoming year are cuts that they really feel are difficult cuts. And that doesn't mean that all cuts aren't difficult, but some are more difficult than others. The PE people, there was a PE group working, and we know there's a $202,000 plus, I think, the teacher at $70,000. Big money item to do away with the PE program. They've been working diligently, and I think they feel they are at a place that, not to say that we should not do the layoffs, but that they hope that you'd be giving them time to continue with their work to try and reduce the cost and find some alternative ways to fund, with the expectation that if they didn't come up with the money, that the layoffs would have been done. But they want you to know that they're working hard and hoping you give them some more time. And I think, what they would want is to know that you, with as much consideration and thoughtful questioning, will look and ultimately come up with some cuts that are necessary to balance the budget, but have been seriously considered and have considered their input. So they're here tonight. I appreciate they're all coming. If you have questions, if you have items that you want to have clarified, they're here to talk with you. And if not, there may be some of them who want to personally express some of their interest in working with you to help come up with ideas for cutting the budget and coming up with a balanced budget.
Thank you, Bev. May I just add, just to give a background of how our BAC evolved. In front of you, we have representatives from each of our unions, as well as every site principals represented, as well as the cabinet level at the district office. It morphed into last year in trying to be more equitable and fair in the voting process. Not that these are the suggestions that we come up with, priorities. And what we did was, in the voting aspect, we would have 6 different pots. So then our TCA group would be one pot. Our CSCA 105 group would be one pot with one vote. And our CSCA 823 would be another pot with another vote. Our elementary principals is another pod with one pod with one vote, and at the district level also one pod with one vote, totaling 6 pods. So just wanted to give you that all of our representatives, leaders in all levels are represented as part of our BAC, and I want to thank our board for allowing us to have this joint meeting so that we would have a dialogue with the board regarding these reductions and cuts, because these are very painful reductions and cuts, and we really need to think early before we have to cut them. So thank you.
One more comment also before I go. There are some items that have A's, B's, and C's next to them. So if you look on your page of the cuts, if you look at item 70A instead of 1.6, that might be the easiest way to find it. Just look over at the average column.
Which list?
I think it's the one, it's color-coded one like this. It's the first page that looks like, I don't have it. I do have it, but I don't know.
Actually, on this list where it says vote.
Yeah,
that's-
no, not the real thing. Actually, this is the budget adjustment page. So if you look down and find one that's 1.6, it's on the second 70A. Well, let's look up at the very top. I've got 75D and 75A. You see that on the budget adjustment sheet?
Yeah.
Okay, the reason they're both 75, they have the same, they have to do with the same topic. Okay, so what you have to understand is sometimes people would say, let's take the media centers, cut the media center by $50,000, and then somebody said, cut the media centers altogether. And so obviously, if you cut the media, you can't look at both of those. And so I listed them as close together as possible so that even though their rating, their average is different, because I didn't want you to look at them as separate items, because really, all of the things having to do with media center, you can't do, if there are 3 suggestions, you can't do all 3 because they kind of cross each other out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Good question, I was wondering about this.
Maybe make an announcement that your chair.
Yeah.
Oh, there are chairs in the room out here, if you care to sit. Thank you. Okay, I'm not quite sure how we're going to proceed at this point. I guess I would start off by asking my fellow board members if they have questions based upon the information in the sheet, the packet.
I prefer just starting at the first one and just going through them. Let people make comments as we do each one of them.
We can do that. We're going to try to have to be a little bit expeditious though.
Yeah, a lot of them will just fall out.
David wants to have you look at the budget projection sheet. It's the second sheet, I think, we should have.
The attachment 1, maybe you guys a bigger copy because I know we're all older and can't read it.
Way to win friends and influence people.
This case is using our second intro, just so everybody knows. This case is with the governor's proposed possible $370 per ADA reduction. So it is trying to come up with a solution to cover that possible reduction, which is a requirement of LACO that we have a plan to cover it should it occur. It has not occurred yet, so we're coming up with a plan to accomplish that. The first year, 12-13, we would have enough for 3% with about 60,000 extra. This includes all the reductions that are on attachment 2, which are reductions that you have approved last year. It includes all those reductions. Okay? In year 13-14, still including all of those reductions as well, we would need to come up with $2,237,253 to maintain a 3% required minimum. And then in 14-15, again, with all the reductions included on this sheet, which has a lot of negotiable items, such as 5 furlough days, step freezes, stipends, etc., we would need another $226,000 to cover our shortfall. Over that 3-year period, most of it happening in 13-14, we need the $2,463,000 in reductions somewhere, most of it happening before 13-14, or during 13-14.
Good. The other thing I would add is this is a fact-finding meeting tonight. We're not in a position to make any decisions, so we won't be going through and voting that kind of thing. So I guess we'll get Bob in.
On this spreadsheet, David, thank you very much for putting it large. A couple of questions. One in 13-14 and 14-15, we project flat, no change in ADA. But the last couple of years, we've had ADA growth. Are we required to, or is our projection showing no growth? Or could we have some growth that we utilize?
If we can show to LACO that we have had a growth period like the last couple of years, then we could include some. Obviously, it can't be 100 ADA.
Right.
So we were trying to be conservative and say, honestly, we don't know, but we think it'll at least be 0.
Yeah.
Most districts in our area are decreasing.
And I know you put together a model where you try to project that based on current enrollment. How do those 2 years look in your models?
I haven't looked at the second year in a while. Next year, we're expecting to increase about 35 students, which ends up being a little less than ADA. I can relook at the second year and see where that is.
That may help us a little. And then the second question on this, in 13-14, it appears that certificated salaries grow over 12-13 by about $500,000.
Yes.
Is that simply step and column?
That is the cost of step and column, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board before we get started? Okay, I'm going to suggest we start with attachment 3. Just go down the list. So the first item on it is item number 51. And this is actually an item that we've already taken into consideration. I'm not sure we really need to discuss anything else on it unless somebody has something on that. Okay.
Right, I just for clarification, the budget advisory committee did the same thing. They just looked and said, David said, these things are already being done, they're ongoing, and they were kind of just moved on, so.
Some of these items, the committee wanted to re-look at them, reconsider them, make a decision on whether we should revisit it or not. This was one of those.
And it's shaded gray to indicate that 25,000 actually is already reflected in the 12-13, 13-14, and 14-15
Correct.
budgets.
It's actually green, but you must have
Yeah,
printed black and white.
Okay.
But yes, that's the reason those are shaded. Those are already included in our current budget.
Okay, so the next item is item number 92, which talks about club relief school-wide push. It's assistant principal into Title I, say $2,000. Is that something we can do?
We can't do it this next year for 12-13 because the job description has to be rewritten and he would have to be laid off for that portion of the job. So that's why it's been put. And then he could be rehired using categorical funding. But that can't happen this year because March 15th is passed. So that's why it's on 13-14.
Anybody from the VAC want to comment on that? Okay, next item is item number 36, which requests the remainder of the board travel and conference budget for $2,000 going to the general fund. I'm sure that's not an issue. Any comments from anybody on that?
So that you're aware, that's your entire travel and conference budget.
Right.
So that would give you 0.
And I would say, again, speaking for the BAC, because they're going to sit there quietly, and when I go out of the room, I don't have to worry about coming back tomorrow. But, I think, one of the big issues, and, it's always true, is that there's really that issue of what is necessary. And nobody is saying, if there's a required conference, if David has to go to a required conference for things. But when we're going, because we think, we've got to keep up on things, could we do without that for a year? And it looks like it's a small amount, No, it's $2,000, but when you look at some of the salaries that our classified people make, it may be a large portion of more than their monthly salary. So I'm just speaking for, what I've heard from the committee as we go.
May I just, so that the board has all the information. Your conference and travel budget of $2,000, that includes your, for example, school services, budget workshops that you go to, which is $125 per board member. And that is at least, what, 3 times a school year? So I just need for you to keep things in perspective. The previous board had brought down the CSBA conference down to just registration fee. That is also part of this. So just to make sure that you are aware of.
Right, and that's those dominoes, that by doing it, here's what it means to you, and I think it's important you have all of the information.
Keep on doing the
No, it's certainly going to be tough things to cut, but I would certainly encourage that in order to have a quality board, that you provide some funding for at least new board members to be able to go to some of these things, because it's so essential for their learning. And it looks like it's consistently cut for all 3 years, totally eliminated. And I just question the prudence of that.
Yeah, I just want you to note that that's the remainder of the board travel and conference budget. There were thousands of dollars spent this year out of that account. In fact, there was money moved into that account from the savings from your benefits. So it's not as if that was the only money that you had for this year.
So this number doesn't reflect the actual full budget amount.
Right, it is for your conference and travel portion of your
This is the
budget.
full remaining
Remainder.
budget.
On page,
It's the annual budget for conferences and travel.
Yes.
Yeah, which is-
on page 2, it says it's 9512 on the
And
breakdowns.
and that's because Debbie and Christie's correct, and in which I advised the board what occurred in the budget transaction, in that with our new board members, 2 new board members, and with the governance workshop with the consultant, that the only place that we had within any funding source was the health benefits that was not taken by the board. And we moved that funding to use for the Masters in Governance, the CSBA workshop that we just concluded last week, and school services, workshops, etc.
Okay. Actually brings up the next item, which says we should add, again, use board benefits into the general fund. That was my understanding, actually we did that this year. So nothing anything different.
This is the 12-13 first half of the year that I know how you have already signed up for. So I know there will be a savings, and this is this July through December amount that we know we will save, because I already know how you've signed up. What I don't know is what happens in January through June of 2013.
Bob?
Could I suggest that we utilize those savings in the 2 future years as well, under the assumption that I don't think any of us are really going to have status changes?
That's coming up as the potential elimination of those, but until I know which way we're going,
We also have board election coming up in 2013, so I don't think that is a right decision at this time.
Any comments, questions? Okay. We'll move on to the next item, which says 1112, all remaining funds not used by BOE members to be transferred to general fund. I'm not quite sure what that is.
that is the amount that we had left over after we used some of the money to go to CSBA conferences. That's what's left over for this year. So that's already been done.
Oh,
And every year, if you don't utilize your benefits, those excess amounts end up in the reserves.
The next item is pretty self-explanatory. Anybody want to comment on it?
Could you read it, please,
Oh, I'm
for
sorry.
those of us who don't have?
I apologize. It says eliminate all board benefits, $37,500 is what the value would be.
Oh,
And the next item, 75E, requests that we eliminate all board stipends for a total of $14,177. That would be for all 3 years. Any comments or questions on that?
Can you just clarify what the difference between benefits and stipends are?
Benefits are your health and dental and life. The stipend is that monthly, that amount you get.
$213.77. Yeah, $197 and one. Okay. Different tax rates. Okay, the next item on our list is item 76A, which requests that we add unused personnel commission benefits into the general fund for 12/13 for half the year. Did we not do that already?
We do that. I just want to make sure that we all know what it is. So this is the July through December amount that the Personnel Commission has not used of their benefits that we budget for.
Any comments or questions? Next item is item number 99, which requests that Oak School-wide school move funding into Title I centralized for $25,000 for assistant principal. Can somebody explain more?
And again, that's the same as the one for Cloverleaf. That person would have to be laid off for a portion and then rehired using categorical funds, so it is too late to do that for the 12-13. That's why it's listed under 13-14.
Do you see the job description changing significantly as a result?
The job description, Kate could probably answer this better, but the bottom line is the job description would have to include direct work that they do with Title I programs, whether it's the, tracking of the RTI, their score. So the work that they did for that portion would have to be tied closely to Title I students.
Other comments or questions? Okay.
That also means that basically about 25% of his job is associated with Title I funds. So if Title I funds go away, 25% of his job goes away.
Okay. The next item is item 141, which suggests we use business partner money for the general fund, not for line items. There's no dollar amount shown there. Chelsea, want to comment?
Well, those are donations, and unless we have the money, you can't earmark it ahead of time. And I want to remind the board, the reason why the business partnership was started, thanks to Lynn and myself, we were brainstorming because we have been cutting for the past 4 years. So when the board's budget was reduced, as well as mine, not just in conference, but in other areas, that's when we started the business partners, because I also was getting concerned voices from our staff about funding the back-to-school breakfast when we are under budget crisis. So then that's why we came up with the business partners to fund events like that, food items, and very specific for professional growth.
Okay. Any comments or questions from you? I'll move on to item number 160, which says eliminate take-home vehicles for savings of about $1,900.
It's, both drivers are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Any comments or questions?
There are 2 M&O people that take home 2 vehicles.
They're both on call, or are they trade off? So they
No, we're both on call 24/7.
both on call for different purposes, or
For everything.
so either
We
one?
get called by custodians, we get called by site staff, we get called by the alarm companies.
So is that you and Dave?
Dave.
This one I called, you just need to call.
Any comments or questions? Okay. We'll move on to item number 70A, which has to do with the Emperor Fund, and to move the, I guess it's the elimination, to 1314 in the amount of $424,493.
Well, that's when it was suggested to move, the committee had, some people had it moved to 1213. So it's one of the items the BAC would like you to reconsider its use. It's one of the few just dollar items, not people-related items.
I'm not sure I understand that. I see on the list it's not included in 1213. It starts being included in 1314.
Each year we've budgeted that those funds be used in the third year, which we also did when we did second interim. And so since now the second year is the year where we need the biggest dollars, the idea was to move it into the second year instead of the third year.
Okay.
And use it sooner.
I see. Okay, it's a negative amount in the third year. It's good to pick that up. Okay. Any comments or questions?
Does Emperor then get reimbursed for the bond issue?
No.
So the money's gone, and that's it?
Yes, one-time money.
However, if the board does go forward with the bond being placed on ballot, we've gone through the facility assessment and needs to where all schools, including Emperor, have been included in that process.
Mr. Smith, if I may comment, and I'm not going to belabor the point, Mr. Nollenberg raises a very good point, which we've come to the board with before, and I know there are no guarantees, but that money is one-time money that rejuvenates the, it's not the word I need, but regenerates every 25 years. And so all the other schools in the bond will have the opportunity to apply to the state for that money for the bond on the difference. Our money will be gone. And that's one point that I think we've not ever made a major issue of it with our families, but our school site council has said over the last couple of years how concerned they are about that.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, the next item on the list is item 76, which says to capture the unused benefits from the Personnel Commission. Knight was confused with the difference between 76 and 76A. I think it's basically the same thing, isn't it?
Yes.
This is the portion that we've captured this year, 11-12. We just wanted, when the BAC looked at everything, they ranked it as a high ranking. We've already done it, we've already captured that amount, but it is one of the high ranking items.
Okay. Any comments? Okay, the next item is item number 111, which calls for no overtime for classified management, instead suggesting we give them comp time. Actually, I have a question about that. Has anybody checked with our attorneys? Is that legal? I'm sure it is. No.
I haven't checked with our legal, however, the management is not part of the contract language that the CSBA 105 is under. However, it does bring up a question in that when a person is originally hired, what their expectations for earnings on that.
It's kind of ironic. I was just actually going through some training 2 days ago at work related to overtime. I believe it said it's the law in California must pay people for overtime. So that's the reason I'm asking, so we should find out if it's...
I think the issue becomes...
Excuse me, non-exempt people.
Yes,
Non-exempt versus non-exempt.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the issues that arises at the BAC, you know, where the board has been trying to limit overtime. And so hourly employees have been told they can't earn overtime, and yet a management person is receiving overtime. And so it just is a question of, is there a way to balance if they need to work overtime? Why can't they adjust their work hours on that day to come in later so they can stay for that?
I just want to add that we have been reducing in overtime I believe my first year, the budget was up to, it was over 5,000. So we've cut close to half. And also the, you can't just eliminate it because if a person is absent, the replacement person will be getting overtime.
Right, and that speaks to management only. So if a classified person that's an hourly employee does overtime, in fact, they must be paid overtime or paid comp time at time and a half because they are hourly employees. And so it doesn't apply if somebody else substitutes to do that.
Well, I'm just curious whether this is truly overtime, typically, as you've already kind of
I understand where you're coming from. This was part of her job description when she was hired and so forth. There are a lot of us who had a lot of different job descriptions and so forth, and said 20% less, 50% less, and so forth. It is really hard to see a classified management receive paid overtime when you lost so many other employees. And it wasn't directly said specifically classified management when we started a year ago. It was all overtime. Let's really look at why there's overtime. And we discovered a lot of things like instructional aides stayed an additional 15 minutes because mom was late in picking up. Little things like that maybe, could you just tell them, come in 15 minutes late tomorrow. Let's really watch where our money is going. And that's a lot of it. And I think this is why we can continue from the committee or from people personally. Nobody should be getting overtime when people have already had their hours reduced or they've lost their jobs. So that's a big thing.
I don't disagree in it at all. Like I said, I think we should check with their attorneys first because it may be required. And I know I have a situation at work where they're required, whether we authorize it or not. Okay, so we are on to item 162, and this is, I guess, several things kind of combined. It really talks about eliminating the highway supervisor for savings of $5,639. And any comments or questions on this?
Yeah, I have comments. M&O supervisor has had added to his duties the integrated pest management program, which requires him to notify every school site in 3 different languages every time we spray for anything. He also is responsible for the 5th inspection, which is one of our yearly inspections that we have to do at each school site. It's very comprehensive. It takes weeks to compile all the information after gathering information at each site. If you reduce him down to back to building trades lead person, he'll go on as one of the on-call guys, so he will have some overtime. So you're really not saving much, and we're losing some things that he does that are important, as well as the summer cleaning. So.
Any comments or questions? Thanks, Dave. Let's see. Next item is eliminate one instructional services coordinator. It says partial reduction for savings of $23,216. Comments or questions about this?
I'd like to address that, please, ma'am.
Okay.
Instructional services folks are paid out of different fundings of categorical. And we do have one coordinator who's paid out of the Pupil Services Fund. You might recall that at the beginning of the year, we did some more restructuring in instructional services, and we pulled in the pupil services from another department to instructional services. And so since 2007, we have tried to be very diligent in the services that we provide for the sites. And we have revamped and restructured in such a way that we are down 2 FTEs. We used to have a 50% ELD coordinator, a 50% gate coordinator, and a full-time BITSA director. We have modified all those roles and responsibilities. They haven't gone away, they still exist. And we've absorbed pupil services as well. And so it's an interesting thing to look at. The $23,000 does go to oversee our SARB, our expulsions, our suspensions, and to work with Arcadia in a partnership. We have our SARB meetings monthly, and next year we will be facilitating those meetings for our 2 districts.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Any other comments or questions, Chelsea?
Just to add that Pupil Services, the division itself and its budget is separately because it is required, mandated by state that we have the SAR process, that when we do go through student discipline, that we do it in the most due processed and a process in which where everything is done fairly as we can possibly do and have for our students and our parents that are involved, as well as our schools. I wanted to add that prior to having the instructional coordinator oversee this all together, it was partially split between our special ed and instructional coordinator before, and it really did not work out. And prior to that, I believe the principal at Dr. Doug Sears Learning Center was the one who oversaw the expulsion hearing. But I have to say that there is a conflict there. For example, every year you cannot guarantee, but there are issues that come up, and board members are well advised of expulsions and suspensions, in which if it does occur at the Learning Center, Stephen cannot represent the district. So someone at the district has to oversee that. And for the SAR process, that's how actually one of the major requirements for our parents. If a student gets an F, they're not penalized. They're not called into court system saying that, hey, your child got an F, they're failing, what are you doing something about it? However, our parents will be called into court system due to attendance. And the whole SAR hearing is a legal aspect of the district that we have to follow. So this is a crucial position. And I do believe that Kate was working with David on the people personnel services budget, in which there could be savings in the other parts of the budget to cover the person in this.
Thank you, Debbie. Any questions?
Yeah, I don't know how to start this. I think that you can understand how an argument could be made for every single one of these items, so you can kind of feel the pain of the BAC for the past 4 years. I think what needs to be kept in mind are choices are being made on how to spend the money. The choices that are being made are not necessarily the only way that the money can be spent. Has every department, every site, every employee taking a hit? Yes. Can we all say we can't take any more hits? Yes. But the reality is something needs to be cut. So I hate for this process to be so labored because people feel they have to speak up for each individual thing. That if there is clarification that's needed, that's certainly understandable. But we could argue every single expense, and the fact is there are choices. If the choice isn't being made for money to be put for pupil services out of categorical monies, it would have to be used somewhere else. If we're not going to employ a curriculum person that we employed before, we could then employ classroom aides. There are lots of choices that can be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is 23D, and it calls for reduction in the curriculum coordinator back to 60%, as it was in January 2012, but it doesn't show a savings. It shows an increase, 17,528. Is that right?
All of those are kind of, that's why the 23s are all together, it's the same one. You know, there's only one certain amount of money, so it kind of, looking at, it's going to be 20,
This particular position, if they were reduced back 40%, that 40% would be out of the BITSA program. They'd no longer be the BITSA coordinator. Duarte's our partner, so Duarte would take over the funding, and they would provide a coordinator. We would lose the money.
Or you restructure.
That person would then have to be returned back to a classroom. So you would have a person laid off in the classroom, a teacher of 40%, and replaced with her as a 40%. The lowest person in that area would be costing $17,500 less. So therefore, you would lose money.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
That's the logic.
Okay, the next item is 23B, which is a reduction of a half instructional services coordinator. It's the same dollar amount as 23E and 23A, which we already talked about.
They were just different ways that people want to look at it, or different options.
So again, this would be a situation where it's one or none, but not something else.
yes.
Okay, we'll move on to item 159, which recommends selling or mothballing half the trucks. And the lighters can double up to save gas, but there's no dollar amount.
We actually feel that would be a cost, because now you've got two guys working the same job, one's standing around while the other one's doing his job. So we don't think there's any benefit to that. What that cost is, I have no idea.
Okay, we are on to item number 69, which talks about the lot here, moving into 1314 in terms of the sale. The value is estimated to $60,000. Any comments or questions on that?
I have one. We need to check the legality of that. I believe it's extended through 1314, but we haven't done that. The other issue with this is if we sell that parking lot, we lose deferred maintenance money from the state for 5 years. We get about $205,000 a year, so we would lose $1 million in revenue over that 5 years if we sold this property and used it.
And why is that?
If you sell a piece of property and use the money as an operating expense, which is what we would do, then you have to sign a document saying, I don't need deferred maintenance money from the state for the next 5 years. That's part of the requirements in that law.
Okay. Bob?
I've always been a little concerned about us using this kind of as a way to balance the budget 3 years out, because my sense was that there was not the will to sell the property. And frankly, my view is it's an impairment of the value of the district office, which if we at some point were to choose to sell the district office and move to a different location, it'd be worth less because we've disposed of part of the parking lot. So I also believe that the city has some interest in negotiating some kind of deal with us. So maybe there's an opportunity not to take the penalties of the deferred maintenance, and actually we can enter into a favorable agreement with the city.
Yeah.
Do you have the appraisal for the 360?
I do.
Okay, we'll move on to item 20A, which has to do with the elimination of class size reduction for K to 3 and 1213, moving it from 31 to 1, and the savings is estimated to be $321,000. Comments or questions from anybody?
And this one, you'll notice there's a column called reconsider, and there's an asterisk in that column. So this is one of the items that the BAC asked to be reconsidered by the board and possibly restored. if you chose to restore that, then there would be a negative 321,000 added to each of the years.
And I'm sorry for not fully understanding this one. The column that's labeled personnel with an asterisk in it, what was the intent of that column?
If there is a position that's involved in that item, so there are staff members involved in that item.
We lose a penalty because the class size now exceeds, 25, 26?
We are losing a penalty. I don't have the exact percentage right now, but it fluctuates. It fluctuates depending on what ratio of students to teachers you have. The top penalty is currently 30%. That structure goes away in 14-15, and you lose 100% of that money. And we have included that in our budget, that we would lose all of that.
Well,
We have a large audience, and I don't know how many people are here that haven't been here before, but the issue of class size reduction, I can't think of any topic that probably has more impact on our kids and the quality of the education that we are able to deliver. And just because we're glossing over it or maybe moving on quickly, this is a huge item that everybody that's been here knows how seriously we take this, how carefully we're looking at it, and really hope to find solutions. But this is the huge item on this list as far as I'm concerned.
Next item is item 20B, which talks about, I guess, eliminating class size reduction in second and third grade only, and 25 to 1 in kindergarten and first grade, but there's no dollar savings.
Most of our classes right now, based on our projection for next year, would be at that level except for one. So there wouldn't be any difference.
Okay. Next item, 29 and actually 30, they both already, it's having to do with elimination of the PE teacher, savings of $64,000, and the elementary music overload savings of $30,000. These have already been approved. Is there a change, or they're just noted for it?
Again, the committee, that's one that, right, the committee wanted you to reconsider.
Gotcha. Okay, item number 40A is next, which calls for the elimination of one counselor for savings of $94,143. Any comments or questions on that?
Which school was this account?
The counselors that are paid out of unrestricted general funds, which there's only a couple left, and most of them are at the high school.
And I'm assuming there would be some sort of counter rebalance loads and whatnot between what's people's availability, so that we don't.
The ripple effect is.
Yeah.
We currently have 5 high school counselors. They've already seen reduction starting in the beginning of last school year, 2 years ago. Along with that, I want to remind the board that, let's see, during our first budget crisis, when there was that opportunity, we were able to, when a dean left, we kept the high school at the reduced amount, which is 3 assistant principals. So at the administrative level and support level for our students, high school has seen reductions.
There are only 2 sites that receive unrestricted dollars for counselors, the high school and the Learning Center. So if you eliminate an unrestricted person as a counselor, it has to be in those places.
And just to add to the fact-finding, the high school does not receive Title I monies. And you might recall earlier in the year, we were able to push in a counselor at Clovelly and La Rosa because those 2 schools became school-wide. That is not the case for the high school, to let you know.
Thank you. Next item is related to the last one. It's actually a recommendation to eliminate 2 high school counselors for savings of $186,000.
Same thing, right, location?
Yeah.
High school. Okay, the next 2 items, 28 and 35, talk about the elimination of PE aides and reduce some of them staff by 2 FTEs. And I get those are on the list for reconsideration, correct?
Mr. Smith, may I address that?
Yes.
We spent all of today, the elementary principals, with the support of a representative from the Teachers Association, as well as Robin and Jerry were there. And that's what Bev alluded to. We believe we have a plan that reduces the cost of PE, but still maintains a PE program. And so that's when she asked for additional time. We're asking for the reconsideration to not eliminate the program, but to roll out a program that we believe is cost effective, that would we would need to do some fundraising, asking the foundation and some other sources. But we believe from the time we put in today that it is doable. There would still be some reductions in personnel, but not to the extreme that this would bring about.
And I'd like to add that they really met, the subcommittee met several times over, and even today went through details, numbers, and everything else. And I really want to thank that subcommittee, as well as I believe Gary and Kate for assisting with all the numbers behind it as well.
And I think one of the things in terms of looking at that, obviously the layout notices would probably have to continue to be given. But you know, the hope is that the commitment of the board would be to say, if we come up back and say we have this money, that it be used specifically for that purpose.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Did you have a ballpark of how much money?
We do, but I don't think for this juncture it's appropriate, but we think it's doable. But today was the culminating. We've had 8 meetings on this. So we've had subcommittees of the subcommittee, so we feel we have a good plan.
And I guess, Julio, you got your hand up. I'm sorry.
I do. I apologize, board members, as it relates to, I'm going back to items 76 and 76A. I wanted to make sure that I gave you the correct information regarding the education code as it relates to the Personnel Commission's budget, that they are responsible for preparing their own budget for their own office. And I wanted to make certain that the board also considered that the education code, it's actually 45253, does allow for the board to present these budget adjustments to the Personnel Commission. And it would have to be done before May 30th. And the next Personnel Commission meeting is on the 17th. So they would be open and fully supportive of hearing out the recommendations that are being made by the BAC as it relates to the Personnel Commission budget. So I apologize. I just wanted to make sure that I had the right information for you.
Okay, thank you, Willie. So we are on to item 152, which calls for reduction in psychologists for $104,870.
Excuse me, in regards to the 2 M&O people, we can't afford to lose any more staffing. We're understaffed as it is, and the fact that we have elected as a community to completely get rid of all of our contributions to deferred maintenance. We've lost over $1.5 million in work between 08, 09 and 10, 11. To replace the system. And those are the things that are failing at all of our school sites. Reducing maintenance, we're just able to do Band-Aids now. It's going to be worse, and we're going to end up shutting facilities, and that's close to the student.
So 152, reduce psychologists, pluralize, 104,000. Multiple psychologists?
That is one.
Okay.
So I gave you an average per psychologist there.
Comments Okay, on to item number 32, and again,
Can I
this
make
is...
a comment on that?
Go ahead.
I'm not sure if anyone's aware, but mental health services 3632 has been eliminated. So districts are now responsible for ERMHS education-related mental health services, which means we are responsible to provide psychological and mental health services to all of these kids who are coming to us and from all corners of the universe. So I don't know how, and plus they're supposed to be getting money for this service because the state is no longer funding AB 3632. So I don't see how anybody could possibly suggest getting rid of counselors and psychologists when we are now responsible for all of the education-related mental health services for the children of this district. And let me tell you, it gets worse and worse and worse every year. Just in the last week at Cloverly, we've had 2 kids who have threatened to kill themselves and another kid who's a kleptomaniac. And so I'm telling you, without violating any confidentiality, that's just in the last week at our elementary school. And that doesn't even mention Oak and every other school here. So I'm telling you, that is a non-starter, believe me. We will shoot ourselves in the foot and would be penny wise and pound foolish to do anything like that. I'm not just saying it because I'm a psychologist. I'm saying it because that's just the way it is.
Okay, the next item, number 32. I'm sorry, Bob.
No, that's a great point. I'm just curious if we're reflecting that anticipated revenue in our budget, if the state's mandating we do this.
So far, they have not allocated any revenue that they have promised for that purpose. There have been promises, it has not been funded.
And is this a state mandated cost that they're able to defer indefinitely until they have money?
It used to be on the County Department of Mental Health. The state eliminated the Department of Mental Health, so we are going to have to pick up the slack and do it. So he's exactly right. It's our responsibility now.
I'm going to try to speed up because we've got 7 minutes left. I don't mean to cut anything short. Just trying to get it all taken into consideration. So we were on to item 32, which calls for elimination of the accompanist. That's a decision we've already made. And it's on the list to be reconsidered. Is there anything substantive to add to that? Okay.
Yeah, there is. Mary Jo, is there money to pay for it in another way? Because we're.
Okay, we're on to item number 163, which would call for the reduction of the M&O director to supervisor. I guess I would send the supervisors move back to. And that would be a savings of $44,470. CPL shaking his head.
And I have to say before I let him speak, but I have to say that would be very uncomfortable situation for the board. I'm trying to be nice. We would not find anybody to take that job at a supervisory pay, period.
I would also, the Personnel Commission, say that you would have to change the job description drastically because their role is to see through studies that in fact if he's doing a director's job, he's paid as a director. If he's doing a supervisor job, that reduces
Mr. Edo?
Well, first off, I think the original idea came from suggesting that we move to the high school. And I don't believe that the high school has room for us, nor would Boca, the elementary schools, think it would be a nice marriage to have the learning center housed on their campuses. You know, and if we were to relocate bungalows onto a site, that would be more expensive than the elimination of my position, my secretary, Susie Jackson, and our counselor, Raul Acevedo. I wanted to say, you know, years ago, the district made an investment in the Dr. Doug Sears Learning Center so that students had their own identity, their own place to thrive, and there have been good returns. There's been improved behavior, improved graduation rate, improved academic progress, and improved student and teacher camaraderie. And currently, our numbers may be low in our day program at about 75 students, which is 18 students per classroom. 2 years ago, we were at 132 students, 33 per classroom, and that's not educationally sound for an alternative at-risk population. We've been gaining students for the last 3-4 weeks at 2 a week, so our enrollment will increase. And then people need to remember also that the Learning Center also houses the Temple City Alternative School, which services 30 to 40 independent study students. And even though all of our adult classes for adults were eliminated, that was about 12 positions, which gave the district an additional $84,000 a year, we still currently provide services for about 300 high school students through our adult program. And so those are students that are serviced, supervised, and need a place. And I just wanted to remind people that just in the 4 years that I've been here, we've had a 50% clerical assignment eliminated. We've had a 50% teacher assignment eliminated. We've given over 50,000, I want to say 100, but we've given over 50,000 of our adult ed reserve. Again, we've eliminated all adult classes. We've reduced my assignment to a split assignment amongst 2 schools. And now we're being charged to use our own facility for $25,000 a year, which really brings our budget down to bare bones pencils and papers. So again, I don't think it's feasible to move the Learning Center at this time, but we have been also receiving drastic cuts, and I believe that we need to stay where we are. Thank you.
We have several more items to discuss. We've got about 1 minute. I don't mean to discount the items that are grayed out. I understand you want to have those reconsidered. So can we focus on media centers, the AP, change it to a teacher and special assignment, and health clerks? First one is 27B, which talks about cutting the media centers completely for $405,403.
Right, and you can see that it has a number 4, which is as bad as it could get. So again, we recognize you can look at the numbers, but the numbers, the rating system is really intended to help you see how important we feel or how difficult those cuts are. The $50,000 that was in the budget, the committee has met, and we think we have a plan to do that. Because you're going to see the people who are going to lose their jobs because of that, but we do have a plan to meet the plan that is built into the budget for this year.
Okay. Item number 91, this is talking about the same assistant principal position we talked about earlier.
Right, the same thing, they would have to be laid off, so it could not be done this year.
And so that just, if people don't know, TOSA is teacher and special assignment. Okay. And then what's the last one really is item 41, which calls for a reduction in health clerks.
And I believe that one has been covered at least for 1 year by the MA funds. They're going to cover our health clerk.
Okay, so it's not an item to consider, really, John. Okay.
David, is there anything else we can use the MOP funds to cover? Or is that it?
It would be up to that committee to decide how they want to utilize those funds.
It has to be health-related issues.
So wouldn't PE be health related?
I'm sorry, what?
Wouldn't PE be health related?
We're having that conversation.
They're having that conversation.
And we've already started actually the conversation.
We're on the same page.
Remember, their money is limited and not absolutely guaranteed every year. I know they're increasing the number of people they're trying to get to, so they get more money, but anything else the government can say, we're not doing it.
Thank you.
Okay,
Also, so that you're aware, attachment 4, those are items that were put onto the BAC list but are negotiable. So we separated those and put them on a separate sheet. They're still possible, but and some of them bring significant dollars. It's a matter of whether we can negotiate those with the bargaining units or not.
why are some of the boxes blacked out and others are not?
They're actually purple, and I guess purple, when you...
Is there a number in there or something?
Yes, there's numbers there.
And they are significant, and I know that you are out of time for this, and maybe some of the people are going to speak at the board meeting, but I think, the groups understand the importance and, the long-range outcome, and there's been conversations about let's get to the table and talk about it. I don't know if anybody wants to speak, but I think, they don't expect you to be able to give them guarantees, but again, it comes to, if money is given by giving furlough days and that money, they would hope would go to save some of those programs and people's jobs for the things that they value critically.
Okay, and hold on. I want to tag on something before this thought, Debbie was talking about a little bit earlier. None of us want to make these cuts either. I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody up here. None of us want to do this. But we are faced with the reality we're faced with, and so we have to move forward. But I didn't say at the beginning of the meeting, I want you to know we understand the magnitude of what we're doing.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate all the work that went into this. One thing that I think would be helpful for us is to have some approximate numbers put in terms of the values of the items on attachment 4.
You're seeing there is. You can't see it.
Oh, they're there. We just can't see it.
Can't see it. We'll get you a copy.
Okay, with that, unless we look around, go ahead and call for a motion.
Could you speak in the microphone? Thank you.
My question is, even if we do all the cuts that we went through, without the negotiated ones, will we meet the $2 million?
The only way you can meet the $2 million is if you did every item on this list.
The ones we just went through?
Yes, including the ones that have already been done that we've asked, the BAC has asked you to reconsider. Everything would have to take place.
With that, I'm going to go ahead and call for a motion to adjourn. Motion from Member Ray, and second from Member Tiet. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0.